Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome into episode 154 of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. I'm Pete.
And I'm Doug.
And we got a 4-game flight, busy schedule. So let's get right into that.
I'm a little under the weather, but I'll give it my best shot. The Canucks hosted the New York Islanders and the much anticipated return of Bo Horvat to Vancouver. It was a very entertaining game. The final score was 4-3 with an overtime victory for the Canucks. Brock Besser had a 3-point night, as did Quinn Hughes, who also scored the overtime winning goal. JT Miller also had a goal and 2 assists.
The very next night, less than 24 hours later, the Canucks are in Calgary, fall 5-2 to the Flames. A couple of Swedes with the goals, Höglander and Pettersson. A tough game to watch. The team just kind of got more and more tired as it went on. Someone told me, hey, even Shorty sounds tired tonight. I thought that was pretty apt.
That trend continued against the Seattle Kraken as, again, like you pointed out, Pete, the Canucks just look like the tired team out there. They did make a very late comeback attempt and had a couple of chances to maybe tie this game and send it to overtime, but unfortunately they did fall short in regulation. Tyler Myers had 2 assists in this game. JT Miller potted another goal, as did Quinn Hughes, and Nils Höglander was the guy who scored that late goal to make things somewhat interesting.
And then the Canucks head back home and play the San Jose Sharks, who they beat 10-1 last time. They beat them 3-1 this time. Quinn Hughes with a multi-point effort to, again, retake the scoring lead in the NHL. Lafferty and Miller with goals as well. Teddy Bluger with his first point as a Canuck, picking up an assist as well. Doug, yeah, lots going on here. It's just the two of us this week. No Brendan. Brendan is off this week. So folks, you're just stuck with the old school appearance here. It's Pete and Doug again.
Yeah, and I'll be off next week as well, as I'm heading down to San Francisco for work. So it'll be a 2-man crew next week as well. And yeah, I think this is the first episode of just me and you this season. Oh, actually, that's not true. The first couple episodes, remember, Brendan was supposed to join us, and
yeah,
he was having some technical difficulties. So
yeah, that's our first one in a little while, and there'll be a little bit of bouncing around. I know, obviously, I'm away for a bit of January, but we'll worry about that when we get there. Folks, in the meantime, you can follow us online. I'm at Pete_Gas. The podcast is at Canucks Speak.
you can give me a follow online at Doug Then, and be sure to check out the Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist, both on Spotify and Apple Music. We'll be adding another funky jam to the playlist at the end of this episode.
And also, if you want to give Brendan a follow on Twitter, he's at Jabo_Vancouver. And also, we're on YouTube. And so if you're there, please give us a like, subscribe. We appreciate it as we try and grow it there. Just another place for y'all to get some Canucks content and see our beautiful faces. All right, Doug, it's a busy schedule. It continues. This is a pretty condensed, tough stretch that just keeps on going here. I mean, we got 3 games in 4 nights. If we just had 4 games in 6 nights, it's a lot happening here with the Canucks. So since we last recorded, they split the games 2-2. I will say the 2 wins, I was at both of those. My first 2 games of the season, I was at the Islanders and the Sharks game. And before we get into what the team is doing, I just want to give a nod to Rogers Arena so far, which is something I haven't done for a while. It's actually fun in there to watch games again. And again, I was there for 2 wins, and of course, the Islanders game was pretty exciting. But there's a lot more life in there. Obviously, that comes from the team playing better. But that Islanders game in particular, really fun atmosphere, and I hope that translated through on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that game at home, and obviously there was tons of atmosphere. There was will we not boo Bo? Bo ended up scoring a goal for the Islanders, which I think was really nice to see. It was nice to see Bo before the game skating, seeing some of the signs from fans saying how much they appreciated him, and he was kind of welling up a little bit. And then they played the tribute video for him, and he got a little welled up with that, which is great. I mean, I think with all the criticism that some Canuck fans might have towards Bo in his game, I don't think it was his fault that he left Vancouver. I don't think he wanted to leave Vancouver. I think he wanted to stay and be the captain. And this management group decided to go in another direction. And then the other thing, Pete, you kind of glossed over last night. Royalty was in the building. You were in that game as well. That was kind of
Lovely
a big deal.
jubbly. Yes, very lovely indeed. Quite. Yes, that was a fun surprise. You know what's funny is the first when the Duke came out, my first thought, this is gonna sound terrible, was like, oh, it's one of the impersonators. Because I was thinking of like the Michael Jackson photo, you know, that famous photo of Michael
Yeah,
Jackson
yeah.
dropping the puck. And I was like, oh, why do we like? I was like, oh no, it's actually him. But yeah, that was kind of funny. There was literally high pitched shrieking in the building when they showed him and Megan later. Like, there's cheers for games, and then there was like this was like another couple of decibels and octaves up with the shrieking for that. That was pretty funny. Bo Horvat as well, though. Awesome standing ovation at the first TV timeout, which is how the Canucks always do it. Really cool. I mean, I said before the game, I'm not going to boo Bo. I got nothing against Bo. I mean, certainly there was things in his game that were lacking, but he's still a fine hockey player. I'm not angry about the decision to move on from him. I think it was the right move to do so. I mean, we can't be paying Bo Horvat $8.5 million on this team anyways. So, you know, I think it was good. I'm happy with the return. I'm happy with how they flipped it for Hronek. I'm one of those guys who likes that deal and liked it at the time. So I got nothing against Bo. And remember, he was a captain of this team. He played 10 seasons with this team. Like, he was here for a while, maybe 9 seasons. I can't remember. 420 points. I always remember that. 420. I mean, that's the way you want to leave as the captain, hitting the 420 point mark. But yeah, so I got an autograph picture of him on my wall. I'm not gonna boo the guy. But I also think, you know, time to move on. I think it was the right choice to move on. I think it's probably the best for Bo as well in a lot of ways. I think, you know, to get him the second half of his career, go somewhere else and do it up. And the Islanders are my East Coast team, so I'm all right with that.
Yeah, and I think the big issue with Bo, I think, was the comments he made last year when the Islanders were pushing for a playoff spot, and he made some comments that seemed to slight the fans in Vancouver. I don't think it was meant to be directed towards the fans. I think it was more directed at management, but it was a poor choice of words. And I think for a lot of Canuck fans, Bo never showed that kind of character. You know what I mean? He was always very
Mm-hmm.
soft spoken and kind of guarded. And to see that personality come out, you know, was kind of nice. You know, whether or not you thought it was a cheap shot at the fans, I don't think it was necessarily a cheap shot at the fans, but I understand, you know, why fans might have felt a certain way after hearing those comments. But yeah, like you said, you know, being able to flip Horvat into a pretty decent prospect in Aturati, who's playing better and better down in Abbotsford at the moment. And then obviously the Philip Hronek trade. And my issue with the Philip Hronek trade wasn't necessarily the first round pick. It was actually the second round pick. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like about that trade. But you know what? I mean, we've got arguably the best defense and pairing in all of the NHL at the moment. Hronek looks like he fits like a glove on this team. And, you know, right now, you talked about the atmosphere in the building. It's winning solves everything, right? I mean,
True.
even back in the dregs of Arizona Coyotes, you know, when they were winning, and there wasn't too many seasons when they were, but you know, a couple of those years when they were winning, the likes of Shane Doan was on the team and Nikolai Habibulin. People would go to the games, people would pay, and you know, you see that across the board. There's very few franchises, maybe the Yankees, the Cowboys, you know, where fans still don't show up for games despite how bad the team is and the atmosphere. I think I haven't been to a game so far this year. I'm going to be going to the game with you, Pete. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's December 5th against the New Jersey Devils. And I'm really looking forward to the Hughes v. Hughes v. Hughes. Yes, that's 3 Hugheses game, and just the atmosphere of the game. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too. Just Bo's comments. I don't think it was a cheap shot at the fans. I think certainly in this market we can interpret things a lot of different ways. I think it was a poor choice, but this place means a lot to him, and you can see that. So it was cool to be in the building, and I'm glad that he got that. The first time, a couple times he touched the puck, there was some boos out there, which again is to be expected. And of course, it's the Canucks, so he's gonna score against us. That was certainly the best game of the last 4 games. The game last night I was at, actually, like, you kind of expected after what the Canucks did against Calgary and Seattle. You kind of expected when you listen to talk it that they were going to try and tighten things up a bit. And that's kind of what last night felt against San Jose. It was just like, look, we're just going right back to basics. And they were just so hyper focused on defense and playing smart, kind of uneventful, non-event hockey. It was still fine. They won, and they got some good contributions, especially from the bottom six. There wasn't the prettiest of wins, but it wasn't bad hockey they were playing. For me, though, the Islanders game was definitely the most exciting. Like Quinn Hughes, like what can you say about it? Of course, he's going to score on the breakaway in overtime. His goal last night against San Jose was a sweet snipe as well. Like it's up to 8 goals already. This is nuts. We haven't seen this from Hughes before.
He's tied his career high already.
Yeah.
Game 20, I believe it is for the Canucks. He's already tied his
19.
career high in goals.
19
pardon me.
games. He's got 8 goals already. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, the big thing, because again, I know you and I both touched it during the game flight with the Calgary game and the Kraken game. The team was tired, right? And we mentioned this
Yes.
last week. They're playing 7 games in 11 nights. The first 2 are back to back, and the last 2 are back to back.
Yeah.
And you could see that, coming back home from that Eastern road trip, they were worn out. And that Seattle game and the Calgary game, that's what happened. But last night, and again, I understand the opponent probably allowed them to do this, but they really dialed back the minutes of Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek. And it was actually more of an even spread time on ice for the defenseman. I believe Friedman got up to about 14, 15 minutes, as did Juleson, which wasn't really the norm the last couple of games. And Rick Tocchet even said that Adam Foote kind of let the foot off the gas, so to speak, heading into the second period with Hronek and Hughes, and wanted to spread it out more. And Tocchet said that's a good thing, right? Like we need to make sure that all these guys can play, the tough minutes, especially with some injuries happening right now with Carson Soucy and whatnot. You're going to need to rely on some of these guys.
Yeah, Friedman and Juleson, I thought last night they were good. Juleson had a pretty rough stretch of games there. I know the fans were on him pretty good against the Calgary and the Seattle games. I mean, though, this is like, it really sucks about Soucy. Soucy was just kind of getting going. It sucks that Suter's out as well, but this is the name of the game, right? You're going to get injuries and injuries to depth players. Unfortunately for Vancouver, the ones where it's hitting at center ice and on the blue line, especially on the blue line, like, man, all it takes is one blue line injury to Soucy, and now you're having a rotating cast of 2 of the 3 of Friedman, Juleson, and Hirose. And I know this is something I've said before, but that's not a long-term solution if you're going to make the playoffs and if you want to do anything in the playoffs. So I mean, I know we talked a bit before about Ethan Bear. I do believe I would be very surprised if the Canucks didn't land Ethan Bear, but I still think if the Canucks are in a playoff spot down the stretch here, I could see them making a push for another defenseman still, because I don't think Juleson's the answer. I don't think Friedman's the answer, and I'd rather Hirose got a little more seasoning down in Abbotsford. He might be the answer in a year or so, but when you're starting 2 of those 3 guys in your starting 6 defensemen, Demko's a world beater. He's awesome. But for me, that's it was the biggest hole going into the season, and it still is. And playing 4 righties as well. That was also unusual. I know that's kind of gone the other way now, but that's just what it is. You can't call up Wolanin, because if you call him up, he's got to stay with the team, and you got to be 100% sure. So because I don't think he'd clear waivers going back down.
Well, I also think Wolanin's injured, right? Or he's banged up. I don't think he played for Abbotsford last game either. Wolanin to me is the guy. If Soucy's out 4 to 6 weeks, you got 2 options. One, you end up putting him on LTIR because he's going to be out that long, and you potentially call up Wolanin. And then, maybe then, you do risk losing him if you do end up having to send him down, or maybe you keep him up with the big club and you send a guy like Juleson down, or you send Friedman. I've liked Friedman. I actually think Friedman's played pretty well overall. I like the fact that, he's a guy who sticks up for his teammates here and there, and he's not willing to, be physical, even though he's not the biggest, most imposing guy. He will get physical from time to time. And I think the defense as a whole, outside of Hughes and Hronek, they've just been very calm, and they're playing the system. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they're getting the puck out instead of trying to carry it up. Last night, you heard talking, someone asked him about Tyler Myers and how well Tyler Myers has been playing as of late. And sure, he is still going to make mistakes here and there, but he just talked about how, Myers really responded to some of the criticism, and he was very hard on himself, not just necessarily the coaches, but Talkett said, we don't need Tyler Myers leading the rush into the offensive zone. That's not what we need him to do. We need him to, stay back and, watch uh, potential rushes heading the other way and, pinch when it's necessary, but don't lead the rush. We don't need you leading the rush. And I think often that's when you see the chaos giraffe moniker happening, right? Is they're kind of running all over the place. And I think just simplifying the defense has made a really, really big difference this year. And you're right, they do really miss Carson Soucy, but I do think a guy like Wulanen, if once he gets healthy, I think he can fill in for the next 4, maybe 6 weeks and be a very serviceable defenseman. I mean, I think he played over 40 games last year for the Canucks.
Mm-hmm. And there's also Guillaume Brisebois down there as well. Yep. There's also Cole McWard. So there are a few different guys. Friedman, for me, he's a good number 7 defenseman. You could probably use him as a number 6, but he's not a number 5. And that's kind of how I see him. With the defense, though, I do think overall, I mean, every Canucks fan who's watched the hockey and the Canucks over the last several years, I think can see that this team has a plan now and they're getting out of their zone. They're keeping it on the boards. They're not doing these high danger cross ice passes. They're getting it out. And the forwards know where to go too. And the forwards may not get the puck when it's cleared out, but they're in motion and they're able to put pressure on the other team's defense. And you get some of these guys who've been doing it really well, like Niels Höglander, like Connor Garland, like Ilya Mikheyev, who go in and they forecheck and they keep the pressure on, and that allows you to change and get fresh bodies. There have been a number of times this year where the other team has gotten hemmed with all 5 skaters out there for 2+ minutes while the Canucks have made multiple changes. And that is a nice side effect, especially in the second period with the long change, of having those guys forecheck while the defensemen get it out. And that's when you can play calm, is when you know where your teammates are going to be, where you're supposed to play the puck. You don't have to second guess. You don't double clutch. You don't panic and make a low percentage play. That's something that I think they're doing well. And especially with this personnel. But man, could you imagine if it got a little bit more help in there? Like, let's say they get Ethan Bear, and let's just for shits and giggles say they traded for Chris Tanev. That changes the whole complexion going into the playoffs. If you have a starting 6 that looks like that, a Hughes, Hronek, Soucy, Myers, Tanev, Bear, or something like that. I'm forgetting. I forgot Ian Cole in there. But again, that's what you need. You need a little bit more in there. Ian Cole, by the way, I think has been fantastic the last few games. I've been very impressed with him. And Tyler Myers, highest scoring Canadian on the Canucks right now, 9 points in 19 games. He's pacing for almost 40 points. So getting some points in there as well. He's not perfect. But he's also under a microscope more than probably any other Canuck. It's he's got a good game when after the game we're not talking about him.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's one of those guys. You say this all the time. It's like a guy like a Cole McWard or Akita Hirose, Tyler Myers. You don't want to notice them more often than not, right? Those are the guys that you don't want to notice during the game because that means they've had a really solid, good game. And yeah, great show. Ian Cole's been amazing. Arguably one of the better signings on the back end the Canucks have made in quite some time, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
And then you brought up some of the bottom 6 guys there. And that third line, to me, has been the most consistent line for back-to-back weeks now. Sure, I know the Miller line and the PD line, they're getting all the points and getting all the headlines. But that third line of Dakota Joshua, now it's Teddy Bluger because P.S. Suter's out. And Connor Garland has been amazing. I mean, last night, I thought Dakota Joshua was easily his best game as this season as a Canuck. He was very, very good. He was physical. He was all over the ice. Teddy Bluger was really, really good last night. I thought he had a couple of chances. The last couple of games, he's had a couple of chances. He still can't pot that goal. He did get the assist, but he just hasn't been able to get that goal. And, Connor Garland, man, he's outside of the hoopla coming out of training camp, demanding a trade, changing agents. Garland's been very good. He's been very solid. And I think hopefully he's changed his tune a little bit about wanting and demanding a trade out. He's really found a role on that third line. And you know what? I even got to give props to Beauvillier. I thought Beauvillier had his best game of the season last night as well.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And look, not only that, but I mean, Beauvillier, Hoglander, and Lafferty, I thought also were quite good. I really found in the last little while the Pedersen line has been quiet 5-on-5. I think Pedersen's got to be banged up. It hasn't been as noticeable. Mikheyev has been the most noticeable of those trio, I'd say, over the last 3 games or so. But whoever's centering this Joshua Garland pairing, I love it. And I know this is something I've touched on before, is having that little bit of size and that little bit of speed out there, and that's what Garland and Joshua provide. I thought Anthony Beauvillier had his best game as a Canuck as well last night against San Jose. And I know last time he played San Jose, he had 2 goals, but they were late goals and whatever. Everyone had goals that game. But I thought, and Beauvillier got rewarded. He got some shifts alongside Miller and Besser towards the end of the game as well, which I thought was good to see. But I've really liked as well, like you mentioned, Teddy Bluger. I really like what I've seen from Teddy Bluger now that he seems to be getting closer to his full game, is getting his legs back. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens when Suter comes back too, and we actually have all 4 centers there. I think the Canucks are actually pretty solid down the middle. I think the wingers are pretty solid. I'm not worried about the forward core right now. I think a guy goes down and he's a guy like Linus Carlson even comes in and he did fine. But the forward core, not too worried about them, but it is really nice to see these bottom lines, these energy lines bringing something to the table. And in the past, like, geez, in parts of the last, geez, I don't know, 8-10 years, they're being fourth lines that are just, they're really AHL lines. And we know that. We know they're AHL lines, and they're usually out there the shift after a power play or a penalty kill just to get everything reset. And that's about it. They're only playing like 6-7 minutes a game. Like, all the Canucks forwards are averaging double digits plus in ice time. You're getting balance out there. And Talkett is trusting these guys too. He's trusting guys like Joshua and Garland and Lafferty, who I've been a real big fan of Sam Lafferty since the Canucks got him. Kind of like a Philip Hronik, right? Like, I was a fan of him before the Canucks got him. But some of these guys, even look, Niels Hoglander, I hope he doesn't get benched. He's been playing very well. And I think he's got a bit of a point streak going now too. I think he's got points in 3 straight. I'll have to double check that. But he's I hope that they keep him in, because that was, I guess that was a match penalty by the rule book. It didn't look it at the time to me, but kind of softened a little bit. Yeah, all right. I'm glad it wasn't a suspension, but I hope they keep Hoglander in the lineup, because he's been bringing it. He's one of those guys hard in the forecheck, and I think he's got 6 goals on the year now. Like, I mean, the guy's improving. And I think what a lot of Canucks fans would ideally like to see is, as the season goes on, is maybe him bumping Phil DiGiuseppe out of that second line role. I mean, sorry, Hoglander's got 5 goals, but he's actually got the same amount of points as DiGiuseppe in 2 less games.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the rule changed as well. I don't think people
It did.
realized that rule changed. And so when they
Yeah.
saw it, they saw he was getting a game misconduct. I think that's why people were a little bit up in arms with it, because they didn't know the rule had changed. I think the league, and we usually don't say this often, I think the league got it right. I think he should have been ejected from the game. And I think it was a fine. If he wasn't ejected from the game, he probably would have ended up getting suspension, in theory.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think Hoglander's been great. I really like his energy. Yeah, I know I did. Di Giuseppe on that second line seems to, be losing a bit of his luster, although he is so great on the forecheck. Um, but I think Hoglander on that bottom 6 is great. I think they need that speed, they need that energy. When the top line isn't producing for whatever reason, the top 2 lines aren't producing. You need, that energy line, like we saw with Garland and Joshua, and Hoglander and Lafferty on the fourth line. You need that kind of energy to kind of wake the guys up, and also, give your top dogs a bit of a break, right? I mean, there's been a couple of times, you said it, Pete. There's been a couple of times when that bottom 6 has hemmed the opposing team in their own end for well over a shift and a half. And
Mhm.
we're not used to seeing that. And the other thing, we haven't seen the Canucks top 4 centers play one game this year.
No.
Obviously Teddy Bluger was out to start training camp, or like to start the season coming out of training camp. And then the day or the game that he's coming back, P. Suter's out now, and he's not joining the team on the road trip.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's a long-term injury, but it sounds like it's probably week to week. But I do wonder, the balance of this team when you have all four centers in. And then the other thing, just going back to the Hoglander really quickly, um, you kind of need a guy like him. Like, look, obviously it was,
You do.
a dirty play, but you need a guy that can play on the edge. You need a guy that can, be a little nasty, be a pest. Right now, this
Mhm.
team doesn't really have that pest player, a la Burrows, Max Lapierre, going back to, I think all the way back to, I know he wasn't really a Canuck, but he was, but I mean, you don't think of him as a Canuck, but like an Esatikanen type, you know what I mean? These guys that could really get under the skin of their opposing team. And
Yarko Ruutu.
Yarko Ruutu, perfect example. That's another Matt
Matt
Cook, you know what
Cook.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
These are
It's
all
totally true.
guys. Yeah, these are all guys that Hoglander kind of reminds me of. Matt Cook might be one of the better comparables. Now, Cook obviously was dirty, you know what I mean? He had quite a
Mhm.
history of playing on the
Played
line and
over
going
the
over
edge.
the line.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, but he was a small guy who played with 110%, and he could throw the body, and he was hard on the forecheck. And I think Hoglander's a better finisher than Matt Cook ever was, and I think he's got better hands and better offensive instincts. But you know, I'm sure Talkett, yeah, he was probably disappointed that he got the match penalty, but I would imagine behind closed doors, he's probably like, we kind of need that out of you. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? If you want to be an everyday NHL player.
Yeah, maybe not put your team down 5, but still, that's learning curves. I hope Hoglander stays in the lineup myself. And yeah, we haven't had the full array of centers. And one of the other things that is quite nice is both Bluger and Suter have been doing quite well on faceoffs too, and having that strength down the middle. I know PD's also been improving on the faceoffs. He's right at 50% right now, but all of a sudden, he's at 50%. Miller's at 54%. I just got to find the other guys here. Suter's at 55.5%, and Bluger's at 57%. You got 4 centers there who are over 50%. Huge. There was even a couple times last night. Well, at least one shift, maybe not a couple times. Bluger was out there on PP2 because of the faceoff. You have your best faceoff guy out there, and Bluger was having a solid game, so Bluger got some power play time. So again, yeah, when you get all 4 in there and they're all over 50%, when Pettersson is your weakest at 50%, he's made some huge strides this year to improve his faceoffs. That's another nice luxury for this team to have, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. But again, like you said, we're gonna have to wait till after this mini road trip here before we maybe get a chance at it.
Yeah, I mean, injuries, like you said, injuries are always going to happen. But I do think even if you look down in Abbotsford, the Canucks have some decent young forwards that could come up if they need to be called up. Arshdeep Baines is one of them. Linus Carlson got the call up for his birthday, which was kind of nice.
Neil Zaman.
So Niels Amon is another guy, and he's been playing very well. He's a guy I
Mm-hmm.
really like. Um, but it's nice, the Canucks have that depth finally. It's the back end that is still a little sus. And I agree. I
Yeah.
do think Ethan Bear is a guy that, if they can come to terms on a 1-year prorated half, contract, I think it makes a lot of sense for this team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as bullish as you are on making a trade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, look, I unless there's a trade that makes sense and you're not overpaying, a lot of these guys that are on the market, as Zadorov, a Tanev, they're going to be UFA at the end of the year anyways. And I would
Yeah.
rather wait than give it up
I'm
an
not as
asset to get
interested in
those
those
guys.
types of players. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I agree. I'm more interested
yeah, I want
in
someone with more term.
yeah, exactly. Like acquiring a player where maybe they're a younger D that are either under contract or you control their RFA rights. But yeah, using Tanev as an example, like that's the cost of acquisition. I think is going to be too high for a guy like that. Anyways, I'm more interested in someone who's like an RFA or a younger D that you have some control over moving forward. Because I think a lot of those rental D they're going to be quite expensive, and I really would love to see the Canucks make a pick in the second round one of these days.
Yes, me too. I think the Canucks' lack of second round picks has been very frustrating over the years. And I think it's nice to, you look at all the players, and draft picks it's a lottery shoot, right? Like you pick a guy that everyone is the consensus best player available, and they end up being a bust. But at least you have those opportunities to pick those players. You don't give yourself those opportunities if you're constantly trading them away. I think back to the David Nonis era, the Brian Burke era, the Mike Gillis era, the Jim Benning era, just second round picks. That's what I said earlier in this episode, the Hronek deal. It was the second round pick that I had more of an issue with than giving up the first round pick. But I think right now, I think this team, the prospects in the farm and, in the junior leagues are playing well. I mean, Hunter Perskevich is playing great. Tom Willander's not really necessarily putting up a ton of points, but he's playing very solid defensively, and he's good jumping up the lineup. He moved from the third pair to the second pair, and often when the team is trailing, he ends up getting bumped up to the top pairing defense, which is great. And Lekkerimäki's having a huge bounce back season. D. Petey's playing really well. He's bounced back and forth between the Swedish Elite League and the Allsvenskan, which is nice. It's just nice to see that like the big clubs playing well. The prospects seem to have been rebounding. I don't think it's something we've been used to seeing in quite some time for this team. For me, I think right now, like the big thing I'm looking forward to is just staying consistent, right? Is this team and the coach, and Rick Tocchet's been awesome. Like, I know we've talked about him a lot this year, but he's been such a breath of fresh air. Just the way he responds to the media. All the media seem to really like him too. Did you hear his comments last night that he gave Prince Harry a fist bump? He wasn't sure if he was supposed to do it. And then he's like, everybody fist bumped me. So he's like, I guess it was okay. And the whole media gala laughed when he said it. He's just such a salt of the earth type of guy. And you can tell, even Petey's mentioned, he really likes the way the coaching staff is approaching things, and they're trying to teach them, which is great. And Quinn Hughes said it too. He really gives the coaching staff a lot of credit for, his offensive outbursts this year.
Yeah, it's again, that's also something we haven't really seen a lot in this city is management coaching being very direct and relatable as well. Boudreaux was relatable. That was a guy that everyone liked. But it's different. This is more of a workman-like relatable, and Tocchet, the way he carries himself, you can tell the players respect him. And you can see some of these guys who play Tocchet like hockey. I mean, I'm thinking specifically like a JT Miller or Dakota Joshua or Sam Lafferty, guys who kind of fit that mold. You can kind of see that he's really working with them and getting a lot out of them, like getting maybe more than you would think out of those guys. And these are guys that kind of play a similar style to him. And again, full credit to the D coaches as well, like having Gonchar and Foot there. And it's nice to have. This is something that for a long time, again, we didn't have different voices. We had very much like, one voice dictating things and from management every now and then, and one voice from the coaches. And it wasn't really something that the fans like, but Tocchet, the way he's carrying himself and what he's doing, I've been really impressed. I wasn't so sure when they brought him in. I was one of the ones I was like, more Pittsburgh guys coming over. I don't know.
Nepotism, right? It felt like more nepotism with this management group, which I was concerned as well.
Yeah, it totally did. But, proving me wrong, and you've got a group of assistant GMs and a director of hockey operations. It feels a lot better just overall. But yeah, Tocchet, he also seems to me to be a bit of a buffer for the team. Criticism, it's like come to him, and he doesn't lose his cool, but he answers honestly, and he answers in a way that people can understand and digest. And so if you get the media who are able to, he's answering media questions, even the tough ones, and is relating with them, and not like, I haven't seen a frustrating encounter out there with him. That's important in this city, right? Yeah, there's always a lot of kind of, the media is often seen as this kind of stopgap in between the team and the fans, and a lot of people have opinions at it. And Tocchet knows he's stepping into a tough situation here with the media, a very scrutinizing market, and I think he's handled it really well.
Yeah, and if you hear about people talk about Tocchet, around the league, like in league circles, everyone raves about the guy. Like, you know what I mean? When his time in TV with NBC, obviously his coaching time in Phoenix, his coaching time in Pittsburgh, as a player, like everybody loves this guy. He's like a true, you know, blue collar guy. You know what I mean? And he works hard, and he's not a guy that chastises you for making mistakes. He wants to teach and learn. And I think that is something that a lot of people, especially in the workplace and especially in sports, we just don't see enough of. You don't see of them wanting to try to teach people, you know, how to be better and to, you know what, if you got to go back, like last year, we brought this up already on one of these episodes this year of, hey, let's bring it to the core fundamentals of playing hockey and knowing your position. You know what I mean? And a lot of people criticized him for doing it at the time, but it seems to have paid dividends. And as long as the players are buying into what the coach is selling, it's going to be a success, right? But you need buy-in from the players, and you need the coach to be able to send their message in a way that the players will understand that they're not being berated for making a mistakes, that it's a teaching moment. And I think Talkett's been very, very good at straddling the line with that.
Going back as well, all the way back to when we were talking about Bo Horvat, I think another reason that that he wasn't going to stay anymore is that management wanted to bring in their leaders, and they wanted to kind of, you know, a full purge of the past. So you have this new leadership group here, and what I've really noticed, especially coming out of Hughes and Miller, because they generally talk to the media a lot more than Pedersen and Demko do, but both listening to Hughes and Miller, they don't talk about themselves that much. They're really talking about the team. Like you hear them talk about the team as a whole, not like, hey, you're tied for the scoring lead with other players. It's like, well, they in turn, they don't talk about that or how great that is. They talk about how it's nice that we're playing a system and guys are buying in throughout the lineup and treating it as a unit. And that is also, I think, a sign of good leadership. Now, it's not always going to be perfect, and this is the first year with it all. But I think what I've seen and heard, and the way that they're presenting themselves and the body language, you know, especially Hughes and Miller, I think top notch, top marks there for what they're doing in terms of holding the team accountable, not hype and praise too much on anyone because they know that there's still a long way to go. And just also taking accountability and saying, you know, we need to do this better because this is why we lost this game. We weren't doing this right. We need to clean up our game, and instead of answering questions about being tied for the scoring lead.
Yeah, and you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think a lot of these players know that. And I think a lot of these guys, yes, obviously the goal is to make the playoffs, but I also think this group, they want more than just making the playoffs. Like I think they want to be able to win a round or two. You know what I mean? I mean, hopefully, you know, make a real run. I don't know if this is the year for that, but I think these guys have been in the league long enough, and they've kind of, they're tired of the losing, you know what I mean? And they really want to kind of put it all out there and just really kind of push it. You know, the only thing, and this is the thing that we haven't actually seen um being Canuck fans since it was implemented, is the new um playoff bracketing system where you go up against your top you go up against the, I guess, the second best team in your in your division, right? So right now it looks like they're not your second, but you're matched up, you're paired up with the division. It's not 1 through 8 kind of thing, right?
Yes,
And right now it looks like the Canucks would take on the LA Kings, which I think would be a very tough first round matchup because LA is a
sure
very
would.
good young, fast team, and they've got a pretty good young goalie as well. But it would be a great test for this team, you know. And tomorrow night, we haven't really touched on this. Tomorrow night's a big game. You know, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 21st of November. The Canucks are playing the Colorado Avalanche, and it's kind of a Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar showdown, right? Quinn Hughes has been taking the league by storm. Cale Makar was named the first player or the first star of the week last week. I believe he had 7 points in 5 games or 4 games or something like that. So it'll be nice to see that matchup. Two young superstars going head to head. Obviously, you've got, you know, McKinnon, Petey, Miller, Rantanen. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night's game as like this is like the big test outside of the Dallas game was another one of those kind of benchmark games I was looking at for this team. But,
Mhm.
I think tomorrow against Colorado, and then I believe they've got a game coming up against Vegas at the end of the month. Yeah, the 30th. Those are the kind of the two big games coming up for this team to really kind of be the litmus test against like the upper echelon competition on the Western Conference.
Yeah, and the Colorado game is in Colorado as well. That's going to be a big test, and I really hope that we see a lot of the A game. And again, missing a couple bodies, but that's just the way it goes. Unfortunately, in this game, I mean, there's probably some guys banged up on the Colorado side too. But yeah, that's going to be a big one. I mean, this is another big week. We got 4 games before we record again. I mean, Seattle, that'll be another tough one in Seattle. And then you've got the Ducks in there and the Sharks again. So I mean, at this point, with all these games, in my opinion, if you can come out of there splitting these 4-game sets for our podcast, coming out 2-2 and just kind of holding your own there, that for me is that's a win right now. If you can get 2 wins out of these next 4 as well.
Yeah, I think to me, that's playing at 500 with this stretch of games they got coming up here, I think is a win. I agree. Right now they've got a really nice cushion against some of the bottom teams in the Western Conference, and if they can just kind of continue to play 500 or a little bit above expected, I think they're definitely playoff bound.
The bottom teams in the Western Conference, and it's pretty funny looking down, and there's them Oilers right down there again. But bottom 3 teams in the league right now are all in the Western Conference. There's a couple of them you're not surprised with, and then there's the Oilers as well. Doug, let's take this into the free pour.
All right. So as you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather this episode. I'm a little sick. I think it's probably self-inflicted. Um, I decided this is the second time I've done this to line up for the premium spirits release. This time I lined up in Langley. I went to a buddy who lives in Langley, and we were planning to get there around 12. There was 3 bottles of this Mr. Sam we were hopefully trying to get our hands on. It's a very rare special release. Um, so I had a little camping chair, but my buddy didn't have a camping chair. So we went to the Canadian Tire and I'm like, well, let's just drive by the liquor store. This is 8 p.m. Okay. Uh, we drive by the liquor store and there's already 6 people lined up. So my buddy and I, we went back to his house, grabbed all our gear, grabbed a couple bottles of whiskey, and went and sat in the freezing cold at around from 8:30 p.m. till pretty much 8:30 a.m. waiting to get some whiskey. I didn't get the Mr. Sam. Obviously, I was too late. I didn't get the Stag Junior, which is what I was after as well. But it was really fun. Met some really cool people. Shared a couple drams with people, and yeah, man. A couple of the guys brought tents with little propane fireplaces to keep us warm. And yeah, we just sat there drinking whiskey, shooting the shit. And yeah, man, it was, I think that's why I'm a little under the weather at the moment, but I don't recommend it for everybody. But if you're a whiskey lover, it is a cool little thing to do.
Yeah, man. I remember you talking about you were going to do that last week. And when you said you were a bit sick, I was like, I wonder if Doug did stay out in the rain all night to buy whiskey. I met up with a couple buddies this week, various things. And my buddy is also a brewer. We went and we hit up Strange Fellows on Clark, which is one of our favorites quite often. They do good beers, good brewers over there. But if you're there on the weekends, which I highly recommend doing, and Doug, you might know where I'm going with this because I think you got me these guys the first time. The Birria food truck that is parked there. It is just insanely good. Like I love quesadilla tacos, but being able to like grab them from this food truck, they make the best ones in town. To get those sitting outside, having a couple beers, dogs around. I don't know. I really like that whole area over there in East Van. You know, you're just looking off at the East Van Cross in the distance. But if you get a chance, you're looking for somewhere good to go during the day on a weekend, head over to Strange Fellows, get a couple of talismans in you, get some quesadillas in you. You're going to be pretty happy. Thanks for tuning in, folks. That's season 5, episode 8, episode 154 overall, just about in the books. Brendan, we missed you on this episode, but yeah, Doug, it's kind of felt like the olden days here.
Yeah. I mean, this is a bit shorter of an episode, which I think is good, especially for the YouTube algorithm. But it's just exciting talking about the Canucks,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they're playing this well and they're actually good.
And I heard a lot of comments. Well, I've heard a lot lately, but I was just thinking when I was at the game last night against San Jose, I could hear the people behind me talking like towards the end of the game. There's just so much different from that. Like this is much more fun to watch than last year. And I was just like, that seems to be a common cry. It's like, look, we're not going to win every game. No one expects you to go out there and win 82 games. But it's just being able to keep bouncing back and stopping these skids. All right, our longest skid has been 2 games. That's
Yeah.
important. Is halt those skids and keep at it.
And beat the teams you're supposed to beat, because too often you would see the Canucks lay an egg against a team that they should have beat. And this
Yeah.
year's version of the Canucks have not really done that. Like, you could argue, yeah, maybe they should have beat Seattle or maybe they should have beat Calgary, but overall, San Jose last night was a little bit I think some fans were a little bit weary heading into that game, coming off
Mm-hmm.
2 back-to-back losses, and they got the job done.
Yeah. 100%.
Also,
So
breaking news really quickly.
Oh,
Breaking news for you, Pete, really quickly. Did you see the trade in
no,
fantasy football? Oh,
no.
you didn't see it. I
Oh, I got to
traded
check this.
I traded Jamar Chase for some quarterback help. For the listeners out there, I had Joe Burrow, who got lost for the year, season-ending wrist injury. I'm sure all of you have heard. But yeah, I traded Jamar Chase for some quarterback help and a wide receiver.
Interesting. Well, I got to check my trades because I got a bunch of them sitting there waiting on me. Folks, one more time, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Pete_gas. Also, you can follow Brendan on Twitter. He's at Jabo_Vancouver. And do check out our Canucks Speakeasy outros. Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist. Can't talk anymore. That is on Spotify and Apple Music.
You can give me a follow on Twitter at Doug Venn. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Canucks Speak, and check out our YouTube channel. We just started this year. It's the Canucks Speakeasy Speakeasy YouTube channel. This episode will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Definitely give that a like and a follow. As always, thanks for listening.
Hasta luego.